Have you ever walked away from a conversation and wondered why you felt completely drained? No one yelled. No one insulted you. They just talked, complained, spoke of their sorrow, as if you were the only one who could truly understand. And you listened because that's what you always do. You're the trustworthy one, the safe space, the one who carries light. But that night, you couldn't sleep. Your body felt heavy, as if carrying an invisible weight. An unnamed pressure sat on your chest. You didn't know if you were tired because of them or because of yourself. Maybe you thought, I must be too sensitive, or maybe I'm just weaker than I used to be. But if Carl Jung was right, then it's not that you're becoming weaker. It may be that someone else is living off your energy. In a small town in Colorado, there was a woman named Clara, 58 years old, divorced, mother of 2 grown sons. Clara wasn't remarkable in any obvious way, just a kind woman who liked baking apple pies, who gifted her neighbors lavender every May. But last year, she burned out. Not physically, something deeper, as if a part of her soul was being slowly consumed each day. There was no clear diagnosis. The doctor told her she needed rest, but even after quitting her job, reducing social media, cutting back on caffeine, nothing changed. Not until Clara began journaling her emotions each night did she notice something strange. Her most exhausting days were always linked to one person, a close friend, always calling at the right time, always needing advice, always saying, "No one understands me like you do." Clara never saw herself as a victim. She just thought she was helping. Until one winter night, she dreamed she was standing in a foggy forest. In her hands was a candle, barely flickering. Before her stood a woman in white, her face blurred, whispering, "Not everyone who needs your light is meant to receive it from you." Clara woke up, silent, and began the journey of reclaiming herself. If you've ever felt like Clara, like you are giving more than you're receiving, like you are slowly losing yourself in relationships that seem harmless, then this video is for you. We'll explore the layers of psychology Carl Jung spoke about: the shadow, projection, trauma bonds, unconscious enmeshment, but not as a lecture, as a return to the place where you were once fully yourself. And never let anyone live off your light. Let the light begin from within. And if you're ready, we'll step into the first part together. Clara used to believe kindness was natural, a quality that required no praise, no reward. If someone needed a shoulder to cry on, someone to sit beside them without judgment, she was always the first to show up. And maybe you're just like her. You're not great at saying no. You tend to nod by instinct. You're the one people come to, but very few ever ask, "Are you okay?" And then there were nights when Clara lay in bed and couldn't sleep, not because of caffeine, not because of work pressure, but because of a kind of emptiness she couldn't name, as if some part of her energy had been drained, not by time, but by someone else. The strange thing was, that day, she hadn't done much. She simply listened to a friend talk about her failing marriage, stayed quiet while the woman cried, gave a few gentle pieces of advice. That was all. And yet afterward, Clara felt exhausted, as if she'd just returned from a dream that didn't belong to her. Carl Jung once said, "We do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And sometimes that darkness doesn't come from others. It comes from our own unbounded kindness. In today's world, especially for women who have crossed the midpoint of life, kindness has become an unspoken moral standard. They're the peacemakers in families, the emotional centers in their friend groups, the ones who always put others before themselves. But here's what no one talks about. Kindness without boundaries is the fastest road to spiritual exhaustion. No one teaches us that even love needs limits, that sometimes overgiving becomes the soul's slow form of self-erasure. Carl Jung didn't see energy merely as physical strength or passing emotion. For him, libido, unlike Freud's definition, centered on sexuality, was the essence of life energy, a spiritual current flowing through thought, emotion, creativity, connection, and the soul itself. Every time you engage in a deep conversation, every time you hold someone else's pain, you're not just giving your time, you are giving your life force. And if the other person lacks the capacity to manage their emotions, they will unconsciously begin to draw from yours, gently, quietly, but undeniably. You think you're helping, but in truth, you're losing tiny pieces of your inner light. Clara didn't see it right away. She only noticed that every time her friend Denise called, she couldn't sleep that night. There was no conflict, just long, emotional conversations, long-winded stories, and the constant words, "You're the only one who understands me." Clara listened. She comforted. She tried to understand. And slowly, she forgot how to listen to herself. Carl Jung called this phenomenon projection. When someone cannot face the darker parts of their soul, their loneliness, fear, resentment, they unconsciously seek someone else to reflect it onto. They don't mean to hurt you, but they use you as a mirror to regulate themselves. And if you're sensitive, empathic, or carry past wounds, you'll open the door. You'll give without thinking, because you've been taught that love means always being available. But then you start to feel tired, not because you gave too much, but because you never set a stopping point. The hardest truth is this: no one taught us that caring for others doesn't mean abandoning ourselves. Clara began to realize she wasn't helping Denise out of love. She was helping because she didn't know who she was. If she wasn't needed, she feared being left behind. She feared being called selfish. She feared the sense of uselessness that came with not playing the role of the good one. And as Jung warned, this is when the self gets lost inside a persona, the helper, the one who never says no, a role praised by society, but slowly draining the soul behind it. Clara said that one night she opened her old journal, the one she used to write in during her younger years, and realized something devastating. It had been 4 years since she'd written anything for herself. No poetry, no private reflections. Every entry revolved around others. Denise's breakdown, her mother's sadness, her second son's breakup. She was helping everyone, except herself. And maybe you've done the same. You remember every birthday, but can't recall the last time your own soul felt light. You hold others' memories, but no longer hold your own dreams. Kindness without boundaries, if not guided by awareness, is the fastest way to disconnect from your essence. If you often feel fatigued for no clear reason, guilty for not doing enough, scattered or unmotivated, unable to recognize yourself in the mirror, it may be a sign of spiritual energy leakage. Carl Jung believed that the soul doesn't break all at once in tragedy, but slowly fractures through silent compromises. Every time you don't say no when you mean it, every time you laugh to keep the peace, every time you forget you once had a dream of your own. You don't have to become selfish to protect yourself. You only have to start with one simple act. Pause. Pause to ask, am I doing this out of love or out of fear of being left behind? Pause to remember, your light is not an infinite supply. It must be nourished, protected, and sometimes preserved for yourself. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is to not let yourself burn out beside them, because you cannot light the way for anyone if your own candle has gone out. In the next part, we will go deeper into the hidden mechanics behind emotional depletion, where the darkness Jung spoke of is no longer metaphorical, but a living psychological presence within relationships you once believed were harmless. Are you ready to see yourself in a completely new light? Clara began to realize her exhaustion didn't come from what people said, but from how she responded to it. She didn't just listen to her friend vent. She absorbed the sadness as if it were her own. When the other person cried, she felt as if she were breaking apart. When the other person blamed something, she immediately felt guilty, even though she had done nothing wrong. She didn't just empathize, she identified. Carl Jung called this projective identification. When someone projects their unconscious content onto you, and because you haven't yet recognized your own shadow, you take it on as if it were part of you. And if you're not aware, you won't just be pulled into someone else's story. You'll become a character in their unconscious script. Clara began to ask herself, why do I feel so deeply affected by even mild criticism? Why does being needed make me feel both seen and completely drained? Why am I so drawn to people who are wounded, tired, or broken, but struggle to maintain healthy boundaries with them? And one day, while journaling, she paused in front of a simple question. What am I seeing in them that I haven't yet accepted in myself? Carl Jung believed everyone in your life acts as a mirror. They don't reflect what you already know about yourself. They reflect what you've rejected. The person who annoys you with their selfishness may be mirroring the part of you that was taught, don't be selfish, never think about yourself. The person who always plays the victim may be awakening a part of you that longed to be vulnerable, but was forced to be strong to survive. The overly controlling person may be touching the part of you that was once silenced, but never allowed to speak. And the person who leaves you completely drained is often the one who activates an old fear, an unhealed wound, a silent memory your soul is trying to resolve. Clara remembered her childhood, how her mother was highly emotional. Whenever her mother was sad, she would cry for hours, and Clara, just 9 years old, learned how to dry her mother's tears with a smile. She became the soother, the peacemaker, the good daughter who never complained. And so, she never learned how to sit with her own emotions. She only learned how to care for everyone else's. In the years that followed, she attracted relationships where she always played the strong one. And after each moment of helping, she would feel empty, lost, and disconnected, as if she had nowhere to rest within herself. Carl Jung called this shadow projection, the act of projecting unintegrated psychological material onto others. The shadow, he said, is not evil. It is everything we were told never to express: anger, weakness, the desire to be chosen, the need to rest. And when you deny these parts for too long, they don't disappear. They return not in you, but in the form of other people. The person who annoys you the most, the one you feel both pity and resentment toward, the one who pulls you in and leaves you feeling lost, they are not here to harm you. They are a message from your soul. Clara realized that every person in her life, especially the ones who exhausted her, touched something deep within her, a part that had never been loved properly, a part that had never been heard, and if she refused to look at it, she would live her life like a mirror, reflecting the light of others, without having a light of her own. So, she began with something small. Whenever someone made her feel drained, she stopped blaming herself, and she asked 3 simple questions. What emotion is this person triggering in me? Does this emotion truly belong to the present? Or is something old being reactivated within me? What am I needing that I am trying to get from them? Awareness doesn't come from cutting people off. It comes from hearing yourself more clearly, so you're no longer cast into roles others assign to you. Carl Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." The people who leave you feeling empty are not the problem. They are the signal. And if you listen long enough, you'll realize no one can drain your energy. If you have chosen to stay anchored in yourself, In the next part, we'll take a deeper look at the rescuer complex, why you feel compelled to help others, and how to recognize the moment when your helping becomes a spiritual trap. You don't have to save anyone to be loved. You only need to return to the part of you that was once forgotten and embrace it with the same love you've always given to others. Clara used to believe that helping others was a noble act. She was raised to be caring, generous, and selfless. She felt proud when someone said, "No one listens the way you do." And for most of her life, she believed that being there for others was how she expressed love. But love doesn't leave you sleepless. Love doesn't drain you mentally. Love, if it truly comes from a place of awareness, does not require you to sacrifice yourself in order to feel worthy. Carl Jung once said, "Sometimes the danger lies not in those who need help, but in those who need to help in order to feel valuable." It sounds paradoxical, but if you are someone always ready to rescue broken souls, you may need to pause and ask, am I really helping them? Or am I trying to heal an unhealed part of myself? Clara began to notice a pattern in her emotional life. She wasn't drawn to people who were joyful and full of energy. On the contrary, she often felt deeply connected to those who were sad, lost, or saying, "No one understands me." She was the one to text first, the one who silently carried others' emotions, the one who felt she had to be there, even when she was exhausted, and every time it felt right. She felt kind, noble, worthy, until she realized each time she helped like that, she was unknowingly draining the light from her own soul. Carl Jung called this the rescuer complex. It doesn't stem from true compassion. It stems from an ancient fear of being abandoned, a wound so old it doesn't yet have a name. People with the rescuer complex don't help because others truly need help. They help because they need to feel needed. And no one had ever told Clara that in her childhood, when her mother was always sad, her father always absent, and no one seemed to notice her emotions, Clara learned that she was only visible when she was useful, only when she was good, helpful, excellent at caring for others, was her presence acknowledged. So, the child who was never truly held grew up defining her worth by becoming the one who heals others. But Jung warned, compassion without awareness becomes a form of control. You don't love people. You need them to keep feeling useful. You show up not for them, but because you're afraid that if you don't, you'll feel empty. And the danger is, you attract exactly the people who don't want to heal. They don't want advice. They want you to stay. So they're not alone in a pain they refuse to name. Clara began to notice the friend she helped most kept repeating the same pain, the same story, no change, no ownership. And Clara, who texted, suggested books, offered support, sent doctor referrals, was never once asked, "How are you?" In that relationship, Clara wasn't a person. She was a tool, a mirror for the other person's emotions, a shadow that nodded, responded, comforted, without asking for anything in return. And her greatest fear was this: if she stopped, she would have nothing left. Jung believed that underneath every rescuer complex is a forgotten child, a child who learned not to cry so they wouldn't be a burden, a child who soothed others so they wouldn't be punished, a child who became helpful so they wouldn't be ignored. But that child was never truly held. Clara began to sit with herself each morning, just 10 minutes. She wrote down the feelings she usually avoided. I'm tired. I don't want to talk to anyone today. I don't want to help anymore. I want silence. And she realized that wasn't selfishness. It was truth, a truth she had been taught to wrap up and hide in order to keep playing the role of the strong one. If you're in a relationship where you're always the one who helps first, the other person never changes, but always needs you. You feel guilty when you pull away. You're afraid that if you're not there, you'll be forgotten. Then pause and ask, am I truly loving? Or am I trying to earn love? Help that comes from love always has limits. Help that comes from a wound never knows when to stop. Jung called this healing process individuation, the return to your true self, the end of playing the unconscious roles assigned to you. You are not here to save the world. You don't need to carry someone else's dreams to prove your worth. You only need the courage to say, I love you, but I cannot burn myself to light the path you refuse to walk. And if you've ever done that to yourself, then in the next part, we'll go deeper into why the wounded, broken, or emotionally dependent often show up so often in your life, and what in you is silently inviting them in. Because what you attract is not random. It is the echo of a part of you still waiting to be seen. Clara once believed she was simply destined to attract people in pain. She said, I don't know why, but in a crowded room, the one going through a crisis will always find me. I don't even have to ask. They'll just start sharing, and I can't walk away. At first, she thought it was compassion, but over time, she realized the people who showed up in her life all shared one thing. They were looking for shelter, but never truly wanted to stand on their own. Carl Jung had a profound concept called the complex, clusters of unresolved emotions, often formed in childhood. A complex might be a fear of abandonment, a belief of never being good enough, or the idea that love must be earned by serving others. And the issue is, complexes don't just live inside you. They have magnetism. They pull people in. Clara began to revisit every relationship in her life. Her ex-partner, a man who had battled depression for 3 years. She once believed she was the only one who could save him. Her college friend, constantly in crisis, often jealous. Clara always said, it's okay. Even when her own heart was breaking. Her mother, who endlessly complained about life. Clara learned to stay silent, to endure, to clean up others' emotions before she even had a chance to feel her own. In all of those relationships, Clara was the holder. She held stability. She held peace. She held order. And in exchange, she slowly lost herself. Jung called this repetition compulsion, an unconscious drive to repeat old wounds in hopes of finally healing them. You were hurt by a cold, distant father. You fall in love with emotionally unavailable men, hoping this one will stay. You weren't listened to as a child. You become the world's best listener, hoping someone will finally see you. You were overlooked. You work harder, carry more, give more, hoping love will follow. But here's the painful truth. Wounds don't heal by repeating themselves. They deepen. Clara said, I realized I had a quiet addiction to people in pain. I didn't love them because they were kind. I loved them because they needed me. And when they left, I didn't cry for the person. I cried because it felt like, once again, I wasn't enough. And Jung would say to you, it's not that you're not enough. It's that you're trying to find acceptance in the wrong place, in mirrors that only reflect your internal fractures. From a depth psychology perspective, the person who drains you is not the enemy. They are a signal. They show you the places within you that still bleed silently, for years never touched by true love. There's a strange law of the soul. The more you reject your wounds, the more you attract those who press on them, because the soul doesn't want to be bypassed. The soul wants you to return, to look deeply, and to hold that part in light. Clara once had a dream after crying herself dry one night, following a call with her best friend. She dreamt she was standing in an abandoned train station. Trains came and went. None stopped. Then she saw a little girl, hair messy, holding an old suitcase. She didn't speak. She just looked at Clara with silent, aching reproach. Clara woke up, heart pounding, And she knew that little girl was herself, the child who had been left behind. In her mother's storms, in her father's silences, in all those nights, she cried with no one asking why. And now adult Clara was still abandoning that child. Every time she chose to save others, instead of holding herself, Jung believed that every energy vampire you encounter carries a symbolic role. The friend who always cries reflects the part of you who never learned to cry. The jealous one and awakens the version of you who was taught to always be humble, never dream too big. The emotionally cold lover echoes the feeling of being ignored by your mother or father as a child. And if you can't see this, you'll think you're being hurt. But the truth is, your soul is trying to heal you. So instead of asking, why do I always attract people who drain me? Try asking, what part of me is crying out to be seen through them? Clara began a new practice. After any encounter that left her exhausted, she stopped writing about them. She started writing about what they stirred in her. I feel ignored. I feel like I have to earn acceptance. I feel small, unimportant. Then she'd ask, when in my life did I first feel this way? You don't have to cut off everyone. You only need to see them with the eyes of someone awakened, and you'll realize the ones who hurt you are not here to destroy you. They are the final message of a wound that hasn't healed. And when you truly understand that, something miraculous happens. They no longer hold the power to hurt you. In the next part, we'll go deeper into another hidden layer, unconscious merging, when you lose your boundaries and become a shadow of someone else. How can you tell whether you're living from the center of your true self or simply reacting from memories and emotions that were never yours to carry? If you've ever felt like you're no longer yourself in a relationship, you're not alone. And the answer isn't to try harder. It's to return and rise from the place where you were once forgotten. Clara once had a strange feeling, not sadness, not anger, not pain, just a vague sensation, as if she herself had disappeared. She didn't know what she truly liked anymore. She wasn't sure what made her happy. She lived as if she were acting, but didn't know the script and had forgotten who she was supposed to be. Then, one misty morning in northern Oregon, as Clara stood in front of the mirror, after washing her face, she looked into her eyes and whispered, "Am I living? Or am I just an extension of someone else?" Carl Jung called this phenomenon identification, an unconscious merging. It's when the boundary between you and another starts to blur. You no longer know what feelings are yours and what belongs to them. You don't just love, you become them. And bit by bit, you drain yourself in order to survive in their world. No one tells you this is happening. No one warns you that love, empathy, and kindness need boundaries too. And so, you drift day by day, fragment by fragment, without a sound. You adjust your words to avoid hurting them. You stop pursuing what you love because they don't like art. You watch the movie they picked, go to the places they choose, eat the food they like, and say, I'm fine with it too. But deep down, you know, this isn't you. Clara shared that she once loved a man, Jacob, an introverted artist. At first, she was drawn to his depth and silence, but gradually, she began to live on his rhythm. She saw friends less. She stopped listening to pop music. She no longer wore bright colors, because Jacob once said he preferred subtle people. Each thing was small, but added together, they quietly killed her soul. Jung believed every time you deny a small part of yourself to fit in, you're not just losing personality. You're draining spiritual energy, the life within you. What makes you vivid, radiant, and unique is slowly suffocated by a process called psychic fusion. And the frightening part is you don't notice it right away because it isn't loud. It's quiet, like a cool stream seeping through cracks, until the dam bursts. Clara recalled a moment. She was reading one of Jacob's favorite books and suddenly began to cry, not because of the story, but because she didn't understand. Why am I here? Why don't I write anymore? Why does my own laughter sound different? Jung believed the ego is not the enemy. It's the center of consciousness, the marker that helps you say, I am me, I am not them. And when the ego is weak, people can enter your psychic space without permission. You no longer make decisions. You react based on someone else's emotions. You adjust your behavior, your mood, your beliefs, just to keep the relationship from falling apart. But in that process, you disappear from your own life. Jung once wrote, a person without a firm ego can be easily swept away by the emotional world of another and lose the ability to exist independently. It's like letting someone else live inside your body. They're angry. You feel wrong. They're sad. You feel guilty. They're disappointed. You immediately shift to please them. You vanish. They become the center. And though you're breathing, you've lost control of your own being. Clara began to realize how often she had identified with others. As a child, she learned to read her mother's moods to avoid being scolded. In love, she melted into the other person to preserve connection. In friendship, she carried the emotions of others, so no one would see her as useless. But now, in her 50s, she knew no one in this world deserves her soul unless she gives it willingly and still remains whole afterward. She started a simple morning ritual. She sat in silence and asked, what do I truly want today? Is this emotion mine? Or am I carrying it for someone else? Am I living from my center or just reacting? Jung encouraged a return to the self, the whole, integrated being, beyond social roles, family titles, or the image in the mirror. The self cannot be dissolved. It cannot be threatened. It only waits silently for your return. And when you live from that place, you no longer need to merge with anyone. You can love without disappearing. You can empathize without becoming them. You can be present and still be whole. If you've ever felt lost in a relationship, unsure what is real, you're not crazy. You're just being pulled away from your center. And in the next part, we'll explore a deeper, more dangerous state when identification is no longer blurred, but becomes a form of psychic possession, where you're no longer yourself, but a character in someone else's story, because sometimes the soul doesn't need another role to play. It needs an invitation to return and to stand steady in its own light. There was something Clara had never believed in, not until the moment she no longer recognized herself, not in a supernatural or mystical sense, but in a psychological one, in the way you gradually stop living from within and instead begin to operate from some force outside of you, a state Carl Jung once described as psychic possession. Clara recalled a moment when she walked into her usual cafe and ordered the wrong drink, not because she forgot the name, but because, in that instant, she didn't know what she truly wanted. The barista asked, black coffee or mocha, like usual. She smiled, nodded, then sat down and couldn't swallow a single sip. It wasn't the taste. It was that every decision she made no longer came from within her. Jung once said, when you are possessed by an archetype or an unresolved emotional complex, you are no longer yourself. You are being lived. You no longer control your speech, your actions, your emotions. You begin to react from a place you don't fully understand. And often, you only realize it once things have gone too far. Clara became most aware of this while spending time with a friend she'd known for over 10 years. This friend constantly believed the world was against her. Her partner didn't understand her. Her family didn't support her. Her co-workers were jealous. Every time Clara listened, Her heart clenched. She felt pain, anger, sadness, as if those things were happening to her. But they weren't. She wasn't betrayed. She wasn't misunderstood. She wasn't hurt. So why did she feel so completely drained after every conversation? Jung explained that a part of another person's shadow can attach to you if you're not conscious enough and lack clear psychological boundaries. They don't do it out of malice. They simply don't know how to hold their own pain. And unconsciously, they begin to live through you. If you've ever felt headaches or fatigue after being around someone, become confused, anxious, or depressed without knowing why, been haunted by someone else's emotions or stories, days later, said or done something, and later thought, why did I react that way? Then it's very possible that part of your psychic energy has been possessed. This doesn't have to mean anything mystical. It's a very real, very human, very deep process, one that happens whenever you lose your connection to the center of your own being. Jung believed that when a person fails to integrate their own shadow, they unconsciously seek others to play it out for them, and you become the one who absorbs the anger they're afraid to express, the one who apologizes for the weakness they won't admit, the one who sacrifices for the helplessness they hide behind smiles. And you do it not because they force you. You do it because a part of you also remains unintegrated. Clara remembered crying one night as she read through old text messages. There was nothing dramatic in them. Just one line, I don't know how I'd survive without you. But reading it again, she didn't feel appreciated. She felt afraid. Because that sentence, though sweet, was a chain, a subtle bind, a way for someone else's pain to anchor itself to her existence. Jung warned that these kinds of relationships rarely stem from love. They are born from unhealed wounds. They become a kind of dark ritual. One person projects their shadow onto another. The other, unaware or afraid to say no, accepts it. And together, they become bound by invisible cords of fear, guilt, obligation, and trauma. But there is always a way back. There is always a door leading to the center of your soul. Jung never told us to sever, to flee, or to fight. He told us, make the unconscious conscious. The first step is to notice. Clara began a simple practice. Before and after seeing someone familiar, she wrote down 3 lines. What am I feeling right now? Does this emotion truly belong to me? Am I trying to fix something that isn't mine? Just a few minutes. But these questions illuminated the unconscious possession. They brought her back to herself. And once Clara saw clearly, something shifted. She no longer saw the other person as larger than life. She no longer saw herself as small. She no longer felt the need to save anyone. Because she finally understood. You don't have to carry someone else's pain to prove your compassion. You just have to stay whole. And from that wholeness, let your light shine. In the next section, we'll go deeper into the root of this pattern. Why did your soul accept such exhausting entanglements in the first place? We'll explore core wounds, the childhood pain that causes you to repeat a painful script, even when your mind knows you deserve something better. You are not here to be the healer of everyone's bleeding. You are here to heal yourself. And from that healing, everything begins to change. Clara used to think she was just a little kind, a little soft-hearted, someone who simply liked to help others. But then she began to realize those nods, the ones that said yes, weren't because she wanted to. They were because she didn't know how to say no and still feel like a good person. Carl Jung called this the influence of core wounds. Deep, often pre-verbal emotional injuries formed in early childhood, before you even had the words to name what you were feeling. They don't have to come from major trauma. Sometimes it's just a few indifferent glances when you showed your true feelings, A few comparisons to a sibling, a few moments when you cried and no one turned back. Or simply the long silence when you needed acknowledgement and no one answered. From those moments, your young mind formed a quiet conclusion. I must not be a burden. I am only worthy when I'm helpful. Clara remembered the first time she felt cut off from love. She was about 6 years old. She said, I brought my very first drawing to my mom, a cat with green eyes, colored with crayons. I remember feeling so proud. But her mom only glanced at it and said, It's nice. Don't get the table dirty. Not criticism, but not a hug either. Not a sparkling look. Not, sweetheart, this is amazing. Just indifference. And in that moment, though, she didn't understand it at the time. Clara began folding up her heart. She stopped showing what she loved. She started observing, pleasing, and learning to earn love by being useful. Jung believed that every core wound creates a false self, a version of you built to receive love, to gain acceptance, to survive in a world that doesn't welcome vulnerability. If your wound is abandonment, you become the one who's always available. If your wound is not being heard, you become the one who listens so well, you forget your own voice. If your wound is invisibility, you become the one who does everything to avoid being forgotten. And slowly, you become the version of yourself that others need, not the version you truly are. Clara once fell in love with a man who was always in turmoil. Every time he grew distant or upset, she chased after him, comforting, explaining, proving her love. She thought she was being patient, but in truth, she was trying to rewrite the ending of an old script, the one where her emotionally distant father was never truly present. Jung called this repetition compulsion, the unconscious urge to recreate your original wound, hoping this time it will heal differently. We tell ourselves, if I'm good enough, maybe this time they won't leave. If I'm patient enough, maybe this time they'll choose me. If I sacrifice enough, maybe this time the love won't disappear. But the ending stays the same because we can't heal an old wound by reopening it with the same kind of person. Clara wrote in her journal, I thought I loved with a big heart, but the truth is I loved from my wound. Jung once said, the wound is the place where the light enters you, but only if you stop running from it, only if you turn toward it, not with judgment, not with guilt, but with compassion for yourself. Clara began doing something she had never dared to do in over 40 years. She sat with her old sadness without trying to explain it away. She wrote letters to the 6-year-old girl who had been forgotten, and she whispered, You don't have to do anything to be loved. Just being you is enough. And strangely, from that day forward, Clara began declining certain invitations. She started saying no when she felt exhausted. She began sitting in stillness and didn't feel guilty for doing nothing, not because she had become selfish, but because she no longer needed to prove her worth. By constantly pleasing others, if you often find yourself in relationships that drain you, it's not because you're naive. It's not because you're too nice. It's because there is a wound inside you that has never truly been held, and every person you attract is showing you where that wound still lives. In the next section, we'll dive deeper into how to free yourself from that wound, not by running away, but by reestablishing your soul's boundaries. Boundaries aren't about pushing others away. They are about keeping your soul intact, even as you love, as you help, and as you give. One late autumn day, Clara sat alone by the window of her small kitchen. Soft light filtered through the cream-colored curtains. Golden leaves drifted gently outside the porch. She had just declined an invitation to go out and felt no guilt. It was the first time in years she chose to stay with herself. Instead of rushing to fill someone else's emptiness, she felt relieved, but also puzzled. How long did it take for me to learn how to say no with peace. Carl Jung once said, "You cannot awaken others by sacrificing your own consciousness." And Clara understood. Helping does not mean dissolving. Loving does not mean surrendering your boundaries. For many years, Clara lived as if her door had to stay open at all times. Anyone in need was welcome. Anyone in pain could lean on her. She was a roof for others in the rain, but never once built a shelter for herself. But then she realized, no one will protect your soul if you don't rise to do it yourself. We often misunderstand what boundaries are. Many believe they're cold, selfish, distancing, but in depth psychology, boundaries are the deepest act of love for yourself and for others, because without boundaries, love becomes dependency, kindness becomes depletion, and your presence instead of light becomes a flickering, burnt-out flame. Jung called boundaries the protective ring around the ego. They're where you keep your soul from being invaded, where you can continue loving without falling apart, where you can give without going empty. Clara began practicing boundaries like a ritual, not loudly, not drastically, not by announcing anything, but simply by being honest with herself. When someone texted her at 11 p.m. with a familiar sad story, she'd place her hand on her chest and ask, right now is the kindest thing I can do. To listen or to turn off my phone and keep my own peace. She realized boundaries are not walls. They are soft lines drawn with truth. Jung taught that when you lack boundaries, others will live through you. They don't mean to, but they will place their expectations, emotions, and burdens on your shoulders. And if you're not conscious, you'll take it all in as if it were fate. But it's not. You were not born to carry the whole world. You were born to live fully with your own soul. And only from that place can you offer true light. Clara wrote a line in her journal. I'm no longer afraid of being misunderstood. I'm only afraid of continuing to live a life that doesn't belong to me. She started setting small rules. No calls after 9 p.m. No replying to messages when she's not okay. No saying yes when her body feels tired, even if her mind wants to please. No over-explaining when she says no, not because she wanted to push people away, but because she wanted to come home to herself. You can love others, but you don't have to dissolve. You can sit with someone's pain, but you are not responsible for healing it. You can say, I care about you, but today I don't have the energy to listen. I want to help, but I need to rest first. I need some space to regain my balance. And if the other person doesn't understand, that's not your fault, because someone who doesn't respect your boundaries never truly respected you. Jung taught that when your boundaries are clear, your energy begins to stabilize. You're no longer pulled into others' emotions. You no longer become a mirror for the shadows they haven't healed. You become the bearer of light instead of the one who burns just to keep the fire going. Clara began to feel alive again. She slept more deeply. She began painting again, something she had abandoned for 12 years. She laughed more, not for anyone else, but because she had begun to return to herself. No one else noticed a dramatic change, but she knew, and her soul knew. In the next section, we'll dive deeper into shadow work, because boundaries are not only built through words or actions. They are formed by facing your own shadows, the parts of you that were taught you're not worthy, the places you've hidden your truth, the voice inside that still believes only when I do something for others do I have value. And then, when you are brave enough to look into that space, you'll understand you don't have to fight to be lovable. You've always been worthy just by being you. Clara used to think the shadow was something frightening, an outburst of rage, a harmful behavior, a murky zone no one dared to enter. But after long nights sitting in silence, After months of writing down emotions she had never spoken aloud, she realized the shadow isn't frightening. Rejection is because what we refuse to face doesn't disappear. It stays hiding in relationships, in reactions, in the moments we give more than we should, and call it love. Carl Jung said, "The shadow is everything we do not want to become, do not want to remember, do not want to face." It can be the anger you suppress because you fear being labeled selfish, the exhaustion you hide because you believe you must always be strong, the dream you abandoned because no one supported it, the feeling of, "I want to be loved," but not knowing how to ask for it. Clara remembered the first time she allowed herself to truly feel anger. She didn't scream. She didn't break anything. She just sat down, placed her hand over her chest, and whispered, "I'm tired of having to endure. I'm angry that no one asks what I need." And then the tears came. Not dramatic, not loud, just the release of a part of her shadow that had been imprisoned for too long. Jung called this process shadow integration, not destruction, not banishment, but welcoming back the forgotten parts and giving them a seat in your inner circle. You cannot build strong boundaries if you don't know what you're protecting. You cannot stop overgiving if you haven't faced the part of you that still believes, "I am only worthy when I help others." Clara began writing letters to herself, to the parts she once rejected. To my angry self, I'm sorry I made you stay silent all through childhood. To my exhausted self, I see you. You don't have to be strong all the time. To my selfish self, you're not bad. You're just trying to hold on to a little light for yourself. And little by little, she stopped feeling ashamed of her emotions. She began to allow herself to say no, to step back, to be silent without guilt. Jung taught that those who are most easily drained by others are often those who haven't yet done their shadow work. They give too much, not because they're generous, but because they're running from their own sense of not enoughness. And the paradox is, the more you give in order to be loved, the emptier you feel. But when you love from a place that has embraced its own shadow, you don't need validation. You just need to be real. Clara said that after this process, she began to see those around her differently. She no longer saw her best friend as needy. She saw a woman struggling with her own shadow, but not yet ready to face it. She no longer saw her ex-partner as someone who hurt her. She saw a man who had also been abandoned and didn't yet know how to love without fear. And with herself, finally, she stopped seeing herself as the one who always has to be strong. She saw a soul that hadn't been loved properly for a very long time. Jung once wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious, and it is precisely in that darkest place where you feel unworthy, tired, not enough, unlovable, that your soul is quietly waiting." Shadow work is not a course. It's not a quick fix. It is a journey, daily, of returning to your real feelings. You ask yourself, what am I feeling that I haven't dared to speak? What am I hoping to receive from others that I've never given to myself? What am I sacrificing in order to keep up an image? And you write, you sit still, you cry without explaining, you get angry without attacking, you grieve without calling yourself weak. That is when you come home. In the next part, we'll learn how to build inner authority, so you no longer need others to confirm your worth. So you stop chasing eyes, approval, or applause. Because when you know who you are no longer easily pulled away from your center. And from that place, you are no longer easily drained. You become a quiet light, steady, grounded, and unshakable. Clara had spent her whole life as if she needed permission to be herself, permission to rest, permission to say no, permission not to reply to messages right away, permission to stop holding everything together. But then, one day, when she looked at herself in the mirror, eyes softer, voice steadier, she realized no one has the right to give you permission to live your own life, except you. Carl Jung called this inner authority the power that comes from within, not hardness, not ego, but the quiet center inside you where you no longer need to explain, prove, or argue. You simply know. And from that place, you live. Throughout her journey, Clara discovered that the deepest exhaustion didn't come from doing too much, but from constantly adjusting herself to meet the expectations of others. She had said gentle words when storms raged inside. Laughed when nothing felt funny. Nodded when her heart longed to walk away. And waited for someone to confirm she was good enough before letting herself feel at peace. Jung said, "You don't grow when others permit you. You grow when you choose to trust the voice within, even if it contradicts the noise around you." Inner authority isn't something you learn from books. It doesn't come from shouting, acting tough, or building a wall. It comes from being fully present with yourself, from being brave enough to sit with unpopular decisions ones others might not understand, but that feel honest to you. Clara began rewriting her own rules for living, not for anyone else to see, but to remind herself, this life is mine. I don't need to reply quickly when my heart needs quiet. I don't need to explain myself when I say no. I don't need to carry other people's emotions to be considered kind. I don't need to be seen, as long as I no longer forget myself. She began paying attention to the small, quiet voices within. When she walked into a room and felt her chest tighten. When someone smiled, but their eyes made her skin crawl. When a harmless message left her anxious for hours. When a light touch triggered an old memory of being forced, and instead of brushing them off, she listened. Jung believed that each of us has an inner guide, a wise presence that isn't loud. It doesn't tell you how to live, but gently reminds you of what you already know and may have forgotten. The problem is, that voice is often drowned out by the need to be accepted, by the fear of being misunderstood, by the voices of parents, society, and past relationships that taught you, if you want to be loved, don't make others uncomfortable. But real love never requires you to betray yourself just to be kept. Clara shared, I used to fear that if I didn't reply, they'd leave me. If I voiced my dislikes, they'd think I was difficult. If I said no, I wouldn't be loved. And then one night, after silencing her phone, turning off the lights, and lying down to the sound of her heartbeat, she felt something new. Coming home, no drama, no applause, just the quiet knowing. I chose myself, and I am still here. Jung once wrote, when you live from your true self, you no longer need to control others, nor fear being controlled. You become the center of your own universe. Inner authority doesn't make you careless. It makes you clear. And from that clarity, the things that no longer fit simply fall away. Not with anger, but with peace. Clara no longer tried to be everyone's friend. She no longer made herself easy to swallow. But she felt closer to herself than ever before. In this final part, we'll touch on the deepest truth. You don't need to be fixed. You don't need to become someone else. You just need to return to the part of you that was once forgotten and invite it into the light. Because every exhaustion, every breakdown, every drained connection has been a doorway calling you back. And on the other side of burnout, there isn't emptiness. There is the quiet light of a soul that has chosen itself. If you've listened this far, then perhaps a part of you, a part that was once tired, confused, or felt like it had disappeared into other people's lives, has started to shift, not loudly, Not dramatically, just a quiet breeze, as if your soul is whispering, I have returned. You don't need anyone's permission to pause, to set the weight down, to breathe without apology, to walk away from what drains you while still holding kindness in your heart. You don't have to be good enough to be loved. You just have to be true to yourself. And from that place, everything begins to come alive again. Boundaries. Clarity. Compassion, but without blind sacrifice. And above all, a love that expects nothing in return for your own soul. Carl Jung never promised the darkness would vanish. He simply reminded us, when you make the unconscious conscious, you begin to reclaim the power of your life. And that power is not control. It is presence. It is choosing not to run anymore, not to shrink anymore, not to believe that love means disappearing. Love means becoming light without needing applause. If this video made you feel seen, felt, or understood, leave a comment, share your story. Let someone else feel less alone on their journey back to themselves. Click like if you'd like to see more deep, healing content like this. Subscribe if you are on the path of rediscovering your true self and want to keep the fire and your heart steady in a world growing ever louder, because you were not born to be drained. You were born to shine quietly and with dignity. And if today you chose to come home to yourself, even just a little, even just with a slow exhale in the middle of the noise, then please know that is a miracle. Thank you for staying until the end. We'll see each other again in a version of you that is brighter and more grounded. You are not lost. You are returning.